Put my timer on. Lovely stuff. Ready? Lovely. This is Human Alchemy with Ross Neal. Hello, and thank you for watching an episode of the all-new and improved Human Alchemy. My first guest today is Stuart Lancaster. Now, anyone from the world of rugby will know who Stuart Lancaster is. Massive experience coaching at academy level, at first team level, at international level, and he's also coached in Ireland, France, all over the place. And he's a real student of the leadership game. So whether you know something about rugby or you don't, Stuart Lancaster is someone that you definitely want to listen to. His views on how to create culture within teams, how to deal with tough conversations. He talks loads about how you deliver that bad news, when you do it, how you do it, and then dealing with players that have big egos. How do you actually deal with that? Dealing with people in foreign languages, reflecting on regrets. That was a really big one that I actually learned from this episode. Stuart's someone who's had massive successes and also had really hard defeats. And the way you process that is something that Stuart has a really interesting take on. So, look, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoy this episode of Human Alchemy with Stuart Lancaster. Stuart, thank you so much for taking the time. Lovely to see you, and thank you for having us up in Leeds as well.
Yeah, no. Thanks for coming up. Fair drive, but...
It's not too bad. Sunny day. It seems to make everything a little bit nicer when it's sunny.
You've got to drive back though.
Maybe the rain comes down on the way back to London. But I want to try and get straight into it. So you're sort of in between things at the moment, and it's probably quite a good time to speak about these sort of leadership elements. You've been in the head or in charge of at least, is it 5 organisations? Leeds, England Saxons as well, Leinster, Racing.
Yeah. I mean, the Leinster one was on by the lead. You know, Leo Cullen was the lead of that. I was the number 2, really, sort of sat beneath him. But yeah, essentially top or close to.
And Leeds Academy as well.
Yeah.
So when you go into an environment, what is the priority to look at from a cultural processes, complete point of view? What do you look at when you first go in?
There's probably a simplistic model I have in my mind where pyramid of culture, identity, what are the behaviours and standards, and is there effective relationship between the senior management team and the senior players in terms of ownership of the game plan, you know, from a rugby point of view. So, you know, starting at the bottom, like culturally, like what is the DNA of the environment? What are the behaviours and standards that the players or the management are showing? You know, what the general phrase is, you know, what are the way they do things around here? What are the habits, what are the behaviours that set apart this environment? We were talking, you know, offline just about when you had your experience at Saracens, and it was very clear that was a very different culture to some of the other environments you've been in. So, you know, the sign of a good culture is good people want to come. People who are there stay longer than anticipated. And if they do leave, they say that was actually one of the best times of my career. So I look for those sort of signs. The identity piece is about, you know, who are we representing? What's our purpose? What's our reason why? You know, so I look for that. Yeah, how do they interact with each other? How do they behave? So when you're going into an environment for the first time, so for example, when I left Leinster to go to Racing, that's what you're looking for.
Right. And with that, when you're trying to build this culture and you're looking for those things to develop where you can look at it and go, I think I've built a good culture here. How long do you think that should take?
I think it very much depends on the maturity of the organisation and the culture that you're joining. So I joined Leinster, and it didn't take very long at all because it was already, you know, they had a strong identity, they had a strong group of homegrown players, they got on well, there was good behaviours and standards, the international players set the good example, they had good quality young players coming through the programme, the coaching team and the management team were motivated and they were highly professional. So, you know, the bit for me was more about how do we improve the technical and tactical parts of, you know, the operation as opposed to the cultural things. With England, it was different because obviously it was an opportunity to reset and change. With Racing, they sort of underachieved, so it was a case of then looking at what can I improve, and so that obviously takes a longer time. And obviously, the challenge being you're in an organisation that has diversity of nationality, of language, of behaviours, of standards. So going from England to Leinster was quite quick. Going from Leinster to Racing, it was very difficult.
Really? And what's the big difference there between building a culture at a club and building it internationally?
Yeah, it's completely different. It's completely different. Club is, your day to day, your week to week, your month to month. You're together essentially with pre-season 11 months of the year. Internationally, you can be selected, have 1 week before a Six Nations start. You have a couple of games, you have a break, you have a couple of games, you have a break, Six Nations finishes. You've got 4 months back at your club. You've got 3 games on a summer tour. Sometimes you might get picked, you might not, you might pick up an injury. So you just don't get the same contact time, not even remotely close. So the chance to build a high-performing culture internationally is far more challenging, and you're bringing people from different organizations and different environments together, to create a new culture.
And is that something you often see as a challenge when you have these people that have a really clear way of playing at their club and then get frustrated at international and it's like, well, actually, we do it like this?
Yeah, I think that was definitely more challenging in England than in Ireland. So in Ireland, the majority of the players for Ireland came from one club, which was Leinster. In England, you obviously had 12 clubs, and when I was coaching England, and there were a lot of strong clubs who had strong philosophies and strong players who had strong opinions. So I think at the time, you had Saracens, Northampton, Bath, Leicester, Wasps. There were a lot of strong identities at the time, and trying to harness all those together into one culture that was the England culture was challenging.
So how much harder do you think it is as an international coach then versus a club coach where you have all that time? What is it you have to focus more on at international? Does it become more around selection and tactics, or?
I'd say the first thing is the reason why we're all here. So everyone's motivated differently to play for the country. So that bit needs to be the priority. Technically and tactically, obviously, you need to get yourself very quickly onto the same page in terms of game plan. And understanding that you are number one at your club, but with England, you might be number 2, you might be on the bench, you might be, number 3. You might be in the squad of 32, but you don't make the match day 23. So understanding that you've got to put your self-interest to one side for the betterment of the team, it's different for a player going from a club environment to an international environment. And so that element of selflessness, you need to sort of coach and educate. And obviously, you're also putting young players sometimes into international teams who are 21, 22, and it's difficult, because the profile is 10 times more. The difference between playing a Premiership game and an international game is, viewing figures alone, you would argue it's probably treble, double, more than that. It's probably 20 times more. I remember there was some games I had in charge of England on BBC. There was 10 million people watching, as opposed to maybe games on Sky, which might get 500,000.
I think the pressure element there, I've never done it, so I have no idea. But I can imagine, I know how much I felt under pressure in Premiership games for the first time.
Mm.
How did you actually cope with that as a coach when you're before a massive game?
Yeah, I think I probably benefited from the fact that I was so young, so I hadn't been scarred by the failure. Do you know what I mean? And I think the scars of failure actually are the ones that creates the anxiety in your mind. So often when I would pick young players who were 20 years old, they'd stroll into an international game like it was just another club game. You know what I mean? I found that, definitely. And I found that myself as a coach. So I was 41 years old, got the interim job during the Six Nations, a bit like Matt Sherratt has done with Wales recently. You've nothing to lose, so you just went and enjoyed it. I'm coaching against Scotland or Italy. It was only when I got the job full time that that sort of dynamic sort of changed my mind, thinking there's a huge responsibility here, and the build up to the World Cup and obviously the World Cup itself. How do you prepare yourself mentally for that? There is no training manual to do it. You've got to find ways to self-manage your emotions, to manage yourself during the game, to manage the media, to manage the pre and post match, to manage the difficult selection conversations you're having, to manage your family and friends, and manage the expectation. And I did all my coaching qualifications young. I did my level 5 when I was 32, 33. I'd been observed England environments in the past, but nothing prepared you for being the number one in the hot seat at Twickenham with 80,000 people there singing the national anthem and the focus of the nation being on you. It feels like, obviously it's on the players as well, but there's a strong sense of their weight on your shoulders. You feel it.
Is that something you try and remind yourself of now, that feeling of, we've got nothing to lose here. Let's just go and have a go as a coach that you had at the start that brought out? Or do you think the pressure and that responsibility helps your performance?
I think with the Ireland job was obviously like a relief, to go and just coach club rugby again and get involved back doing what I loved, actually being on the grass and coaching. So that was a great 7 years of my career. Then going to Racing, it was a different pressure because there's pressure of expectations. You were trying to get in the top 6, you were trying to win the top 14 again, you were trying to win Europe. And Racing had been there in 2016 and 2018, but this is 2024. This is like a few years after that. But in their minds, the ownership minds and the minds of the people who employed me, they felt that they should be there. And so I did feel the pressure again there. And when results didn't go our way in the second half of the first year, and we might not qualify for the top 6, or we might not qualify for the last 16 of Europe, I definitely felt the pressure. And in the second year, even more so, because of the relegation factor, and that compounds it. So I don't think experience alleviates pressure. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it alleviates pressure at all. I think it gives you a thickness of the skin, but it doesn't take it away.
Yeah. And with players, when you can see they're under pressure, as a coach, how do you sort of absorb that and stop it transferring down to the players?
Yeah, I tend to spend a lot of time with the players one-to-one, and try to, particularly young players, try to prepare them for what it's going to look and feel like. And that definitely is a big factor. And it helps them. And I try and pass on my experience of what it likes, what it feels like to be involved in big games. The other strategies I would use would be to talk about it to the group and use the senior players as role models and as mentors, which I think is often an effective way. And that sense of player ownership, where a player takes ownership of the game plan, it means they feel more in control of what's going to happen. So the dangerous thing as a coach is you become too directive and you dictate to them what's going to happen, and ultimately then they're paralyzed by fear for getting their role wrong, as opposed to if they own it, it's a lot easier for them to manage it because they feel they've got something to hold on to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think there's something there that you said as well. A lot of coaches I've had in pre-season, you hear a lot of this sort of thing, and it's very culture-focused pre-season. There does feel like, look, we're building. But the second you get into a game and you lose and things stop going your way, they slightly become a bit more, this is how we're doing it, do as I say.
Yeah.
So is that just a natural thing as pressure comes on? You might go back to that type and abandon those principles.
I think the best coaches or the best leaders I've worked with, if there's a spectrum of coaching styles, sometimes you're directive, okay, we're going to do it this way because we struggled defensively or whatever. Or what do you guys think we should do? It's not like we're empowering one week and we're directive the next week. We're up and down the scale all the time. And the best coaches understand when to be directive, when to be empowering, when to put the arm around the shoulder, when to kick them up the backside. You know what I mean? I think I agree with you that I think that, yes, you own the game plan. Okay, the game plan's like, well, I'm going to own the game plan now. So that does happen. But the best coaches have the ability to flex, I think, during the course of the season. What you do need there, though, you do need a strong group of senior players who are prepared to own it and lead it. And often these players are mid to late 20s. And if I talk about my own leadership sort of development, I wasn't really beginning to think about leadership till I was early 30s. And by then, most players have retired, So you have to accelerate this leadership development in young players so that they can lead at a young age in high-pressure situations. I think rugby gives you a lot of tools that set you up for later in life. The resilience piece, the leadership piece, ability to motivate, the ability to communicate, the ability to take ownership. And I think that the the acceleration of leadership development is critical in helping the players.
Yeah. And you do talk about accountability. A lot of people stepping up, taking ownership. I watched a few of your interviews before this, and you said on a couple of them, after the 2015 World Cup, I caused a lot of hurt. But I'd imagine if you had won the World Cup, you wouldn't have said, I caused a lot of joy.
Mm.
So why is it when you win it's we, but when you lost you felt it was I?
Yeah, I think it was just a sense of personal, take the heat and take the hit, and take the responsibility for everyone, really. I very much felt that, obviously I know, everyone knows in a rugby team, there are lots of people who make decisions that influence the outcome of a game, and some you're in control of, some the referee controls, some the opposition do well. But ultimately what the press and the media want to do is to narrow it down to one person and one thing. So in my mind at the time, I was thinking, well, if I can take it, then at least it then saves, the players, it saves the assistant coaches, it saves the management, it saves, the people, because, I knew that probably, unless the RFU were going to back me 100%, that it was probably going to be the end at the time. So I thought, well, I might as well just, take the responsibility. And in terms of the hurt, I was probably also referring to, selection conversations and these sorts of things, the internal stuff as well. But yeah, that was just my way of trying to help the team to get to the next stage, which was then to go and do well in the Six Nations, which is what happened.
Yeah, and as you say, with tough conversations, that's one of the things I see people struggle with most. How do you have these tough conversations? People might not realise how many of them actually happen in a rugby environment. In a club, it might happen every week. You might have to tell 3 or 4 people they're not playing or they're dropped. How do you approach them?
Yeah, I think I read an article the other day, actually, and the coach said he has about 400 of those a season. So, you've got 10 to 15 players who are not playing every week. You've got 30-odd games. So bad news should never come as a shock. I would say that's pretty important. So, you should always be the players on the fringes and the players who are, on the cusp of selection or deselection. You should always be speaking to them, trying to give them as much feedback as possible and trying to give them insight into where they sit in the pecking order and what they need to do to change the selection dynamic. So some coaches would be less bothered, they would just this is the team.
Yeah.
Come and see me if there's a problem. And there's strength in that as a coach because it means that you save your emotional energy for the players who are getting picked. And that's something I've always wrestled with. I've always felt this desire to want to sort of try and explain the decision. The player might not agree with it, might not like it, might not understand it, but at least they can't turn around and go, well, he never even spoke to me. But the downside to that is that you're constantly working with the players that aren't getting picked. And ultimately what you need to do is put your energy into the players who are getting picked. So your one-to-ones tend to centre around the fringe players as opposed to the high performance. And so when I was at Racing, obviously I tried to, it's obviously compounded because it's in French, with French-based players or French-speaking players, and sometimes you have to bring a translator in. So I would tend to try and use the Monday for those conversations. We try and select the team early. I'd try and at least explain to everyone what they were doing for the week before I told them. But it takes a lot of energy, and sometimes I'm still weighing up my mind: is it the best use of the coach's time to try and explain to everyone every week, what the selection decision is? And I think you've been a player. Obviously, you get the feedback, and you're disappointed, and you then go away and work on it. To have the same conversation every week, if you're not picked every week, it becomes grating for you as well. So it's it's a fine balance.
I think that was the thing for me. I used to see players come out of meetings and they'd be really frustrated and they're like, look, they'd say to each other, be like, all I want is honesty.
Yeah.
All I want is honesty. And then they'd get honesty.
Yeah.
And they'd be just as annoyed.
Yeah.
Because what they really want is respect, and they want to feel like the coach has their best interests at heart.
Yeah.
So if you feel like that coach wants you to do well,
yeah,
then it doesn't, like you say, shouldn't come as a shock. If they're always talking to you and you kind of know where you're at, you don't need feedback every week because you know where you are.
Yeah.
I do remember the times where the coach would walk around the gym on the Monday, Tuesday, and you knew this is where they'd have their conversations.
Well, I mean, that's the classic best time to do it. But how else do you do it? You know, if you go to ask the team on Monday after lunch, and the players have got units in gym or whatever, you either text everyone, say, "Come and see me at 8:00, come and see me at 8:10, come and see me at 8:20. There's a queue outside your office.
Yeah.
And everyone knows what's happening then as well. So there's no easy way to do it. Going around the gym is often the best way, simply because they're busy, they're doing weights. Everyone can see the conversation happening, but at least as a coach, you're trying to give them some feedback as to what they need to do, and you're being respectful to them. The alternative is you don't speak to anyone, or the alternative is you ask the team later in the week.
Yeah.
And you sort of pick them up during the course of the week. But that's challenge then is the cohesion piece about making sure the team that is picked have the chance to get cohesive and ready.
Yeah. Is that also a slight part of every rugby team? You're going to have a certain amount of players that aren't playing, that are going to be frustrated, and there's not. You can't really expect to have everyone buzzing not to be playing.
It's impossible.
I do notice as well, you attend conferences, you read lots of books, you're very into as much as you can do around being the best leader and coach you can be. Do you expect that from the rest of your coaching team and your players to want to be the best in that way?
Yeah, I would. And I get frustrated when I don't see it. I don't expect them to go to every conference and read every book, but I do expect to have an inner drive to want to be curious about how can I be the best I can be. And my French experience was an interesting one where, you know, I worked with some great coaches, but the best of the French coaches were the ones who'd been overseas and coached in other countries or been in other countries, whereas one or two had never left France. You know, so they had a very closed, fixed mindset about what high performance looked like, and that mindset to want to learn about other environments, to learn how to get better. At Leinster, I was just pushing an open door. Every player wanted to learn to get better.
Yeah.
And that wasn't just to be technically and tactically better, physically better or mentally better. It was in every way, shape and form. That was why it's such a rewarding environment to be in. And all I did was kept drip feeding them with all the things that I'd learned. And I love passing on the stuff I've learned, whether it's leadership, coaching and management, you know, any of the three areas, I would pass on as much as I could to the players. And they just lapped it up, and you could see the growth in them. And, you know, it's no coincidence when I watch Ireland play, you can see the growth in Ciaran Doris and James Ryan and Dan Sheehan and all the young lads now who are leading Ireland. In France, they had the same mindset, but obviously it's compounded by the fact that all my content was English.
Yeah.
So you have to translate it, you know, you've got a great video you want to show them on whatever, and you have to put subtitles on it, you know, so it just becomes a lot harder. But I did the same thing. I set up a leadership club, put on all my leadership and things I'd learned, the best books I'd read, synopsis of all the best books. Every week I'd put something on and get it translated into French, trying to grow them as leaders. So it's something I've always done. But someone asked me a question the other day, what is it that frustrates you most about coaching players? And I was thinking to myself, what is it? And it's probably the lack of desire to want to get better. And in the environment I've just left, without naming names, there were a group of players that it was driving me insane. You know, they're on good money, turning up, checking in, checking out, happy if they're playing, happy if they're not playing. That really sort of began to grate on me when I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, giving my very best. There was a group of players who were in the same mindset as me, and there was another group that were quite happy. They weren't disruptive and they weren't bad people, they were all good guys. They didn't have that desire to want to be the best they can be. And that really frustrated me at the time.
So would you speak to them about that and say, this isn't...
Yeah. I'd say, but they obviously, they didn't like that because they'd been there a long time. They were comfortable. They'd been in the environment a long time. So I got so frustrated in the end after one particular game where we lost against Stade Francais, and some of these players were on good money and they're on decent contracts. So I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to line you up in contractual order. From the highest paid player to the lowest paid player. I'll stand you in the line. I said, then the next thing we'll do, we're going to vote for who's the most respected player, and we're going to stand you in the most respected player to the least respected player. I said, so in my mind, obviously, the guys who are on the highest contracts, you guys should be obviously the most respected because, you know, you're the leaders and everything else. I said, so do you think that'll be the case? And they all looked at me and say, oh my God, he's gone mad. Anyway, I didn't line up in contractual order, but I did do the respect ranking. So what I asked them to do, I got a list of the squad, 45 players, or there's some young lads in there. And I asked them to rate each other technically and tactically, physically and mentally out of 10 for each player in the squad. And so obviously every player ultimately got a feedback from 44 players and you got an average score. So the average score then, we ranked everyone technically and tactically, who's the most respected technically and tactically. So I know Gail Fiku's number 1, you know, Owen Farrell's number 2 or whatever, all the way down to 44. Physically, same. And mentally, which is about resilience, leadership, you know, open mindset, desire to want to be the best they can be. And that was the one I was really interested in because, you know, the others are obviously important, but that was the one I was interested in. And again, we had a rank order from 1 to 45, and some of the youngest players were ranked in the top 10, and some of the most senior players were ranked in the bottom 10. So what I didn't do was then stand the middle line and, you know, say this, but what I did do was meet every player one-to-one and say, you're in the top third, you're in the middle third, you're in the bottom third, in terms of how your teammates respect you and what you're doing.
You didn't publish it?
I didn't publish it, no. But it landed. It landed because there were certain players who believed they were senior players, believed they were leaders, believed that they had the right mindset. But actually, as much as I told them 10 times, you know, there's more in you, it took the 360-degree feedback from their teammates to realize, God, it's not just Stuart that thinks it. Everyone thinks it. You know, I need to up my game here. And it definitely created a performance change in some of those players.
Is that something you would do as kind of this is a last sort of...
It was an electric shock. I mean, in France, they call it an electric shock.
Okay.
I don't think it's a last ditch resort. All it is giving people feedback, isn't it? And, you know, I got as a coach 360-degree feedback. You know, if you're a player who's got an open mindset, you'd come to me as a head coach. You'd go to see the backs coach. You might go to the conditioner. You might say, is there anything more I can do? You might go and see the skills coach. And so you'd only just, you know, if you've got the right mindset, you'll just go around and search for feedback, won't you? So it's not like a huge stick. It was just a way to get them to understand, like, there's more in them.
Yeah.
But I tried to, you know, when you've got a team that's erratic in its motivation, concentration, attitude, mindset, you have to try different tools to get the best out of them. At Leinster, I didn't have to work in the same way because they were self-motivated, they were self-starters, they were hungry for more. You know, you're pushing an open door, whereas the team in France were just a completely different group of personalities, different nationalities. Fijians are different to Georgians, different to French, different to Argentinians, different to English, you know. And so it was a hell of a lot more challenging, and in French.
Yeah.
Or 70% of the land, you know, the speakers were French as opposed to English.
And how much French did you learn when you were out there?
I think I probably got to 50%. Interesting, I had a lesson today, so I've kept on my lessons. And he did a mock interview. The French teacher gave me a mock interview today. And I understood all the questions he asked me. I gave answers that were 80% accurate. So if I'd have been in that press conference now, I could have done it all in French.
Really?
So I got close, but the weight of the job and the amount of things I was trying to deal with at the same time, recruitment, contracts, selection, game plan, preview, review, game, then go and have a French lesson on Thursday night or Tuesday night or whatever. There was just no
It's the thing that
space in the head.
Out, yeah.
Well, no, I kept doing it, but there was just very little space to absorb it. But, you know, I probably got to, let's call it 50% fluent. But now, obviously, I've left the club and I don't have all that extra weight. I've got more time to focus on the French. My French has sort of improved very quickly. So I still wouldn't be good enough to have a one-to-one conversation with you on selection. I could maybe handle a press conference or so give some generic feedback on the game, how the game went. But there's a big difference between me telling you you're not getting a contract for next year or me standing in front of the group on a Monday morning saying we've lost by 40 points against Stade Francais, these are the reasons why, and ask questions to the group and create often in really good environments, you'll maybe ask for feedback and you say, right, split into little groups and have a conversation about our attack, our defense, our mindset going into the game, and then get some feedback. That's very hard to do because often you'd split your groups up and you'd have French speakers and non-French speakers in the same group. And then, or if you've purely got French speakers and they feed back to you in French, I'm actually really struggling to understand what they're saying, and it gets translated and I feedback to them in English. So anyway, the art of communication is critical in coaching, isn't it? And by taking on a challenge to coach in French without becoming fluent, it made a hard job harder, but I don't regret taking it on.
And you mentioned recruitment there as well. There was something I was quite interested in rugby. How deep does recruitment go when you're looking for a new player?
I think for me, it depends on the environment I've been in. So Leinster, I would say it was pretty deep. But recruitment for Leinster was, you're talking 3 or 4 players at the most a year. Most of it's about promotion of academy players and a release of 2 senior players at the top who are coming to the end of their careers. At Racing, it was completely different because, you had very little throughput from the academy and you probably had 90% of the squad have been recruited. So you've got a lot more players who are coming in who have been recruited as opposed to developed. And I would say that if I was to feed back to Racing, if they'd ever asked me, they never did, when I left, you need to spend more time in this area. I was doing it, Laurent Travers was doing it, there were 1 or 2 other people sort of involved in it, but it wasn't anywhere near as comprehensive. I think a full-time head of recruitment is necessary in a club like that, to put it across the head coach and maybe just the president. I think it was spread too thin. You look at the clips from the agent, you have a Zoom call with a player, you try to get them, you chase up some references.
Yeah.
That's it. You wouldn't recruit someone at work that way.
Yeah.
You would interview them, you do psychometric profile, you get 360 feedback, you chase up the references. It's not like that, but it should be.
Yeah.
Because it's critical. It's critical.
I think, well, like you say, if they're only recruiting 4 people, you can maybe do that. But
and internally, your structure has people whose job is to do that.
Yeah, I think, like you say, in corporates, I know companies that have 12 rounds of interviews before you can get in because there's also, for some people, it's that culture fit.
Yeah.
You can be a great player, but if you're not happy in the environment here because you don't fit in with the culture, then you're not going to be as good a player. So I know people that have done some recruitment for teams before on a freelance basis, and they say, what are you looking for? And they say, a big South African lock. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, surely there's more to it than that. You're bringing someone into your environment. But that's something that just varies. England, was it? I don't know how much you were involved with those processes, but was it deeper?
For the players or for the management?
Yeah, for the players when they wanted to get to know.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, that was easy because you could spend more time studying the player, meeting the director of rugby, finding out more about the player themselves. They might have also played in the 20s, in the Saxons. So there's a lot more knowledge that you're leaning on. And one of the advantages of me when I got the England head coaching job was I'd coached the Saxons for 4 years. So I knew a lot of the younger players who were sort of coming through the system. And I'd actually coached them. So that definitely helped me, for sure. But again, it's not as sophisticated as you might think. It still relies on gut instinct as well.
Yeah. And you said you ran a leadership club at Racing and Leinster. What are your sort of go-to areas for kind of leveraged learning outside of rugby? Do you think these are great examples of leadership that anyone could benefit from?
I would spend a lot of time studying leaders from different sports, for sure. Leaders from business. I'm generally drawn to those sort of documentaries or the podcasts we were talking about before. The podcasts that are going to help me become better as a leader, as opposed to just give me information. I want to learn. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's a lot out there. I mean, I was lucky in that I went on that level 5 leadership course when I was 32. And that opened my eyes to the theory of leadership and realizing leadership, even though I probably gravitated to leadership positions, it gave me the theory of leadership and how I could develop as a leader. It gave me books on emotional intelligence, on, how to develop your personality, the different leadership styles you can use. So leadership, I think it's important for people to understand leadership is a skill that can be learned. Yes, there are players your own Farrells, Johnny Sextons, who are born, with those leadership qualities. But there's a lot of things you can pick up and learn, and that's where I really push the door open, and that's why I share what I share on LinkedIn, or I've got a leadership club I set up for people outside of rugby. And
what's that called, in case anyone wants to?
It's the Stuart Lancaster Leadership Club. Actually, the problem is at the moment, I'm not going to direct anyone through it at the moment, because the company that ran it, they're assessing how they market it, without going into the boring details of you. Well, you know this, don't you?
Yeah.
How do you market a podcast? How do you build your brand, so to speak? So
Difficulty, yeah.
But yeah, on LinkedIn. I mean, the problem is on LinkedIn, you only have 30,000 connections, which I didn't realize. So I've got 30,000. So I've got like a waiting list, and I can't.
Yeah. Well,
I don't want to chuck anyone off. How do you accept more people?
As a man who spends a lot of time on LinkedIn now myself and studying the algorithm, so you have to change your profile to now people can follow you, basically.
I see.
So that's how you get around it, is that you'll get lots of followers, but you can only have a certain amount of connections.
Okay.
I can show you how to.
Okay.
It's, LinkedIn, I spend far too much time on LinkedIn. But I do see, we're sat here and there are so many books behind over here and over here from all different areas. Are there any that if someone said, look, I'm really interested in becoming a better coach or a leader, could you give any specific books? Read this, it will give you a great starting point.
Yeah. I mean, I would pick out any John Wooden books. I think his philosophy on basketball, on leadership was excellent. Bill Walsh would be another one. I love the Doug Lemoff books on coaching and how he's applied lessons from teaching into coaching. Leadership-wise, Jim Collins, Good to Great, and I was fortunate to sort of meet him. The Leadership Challenge by Kuzner and Posner is a lot about the study of leadership and what people look for in great leaders. When I used to do the commute to London, obviously this is 2007, so there weren't really podcasts, it was CDs, and I used to have the CDs, audio CDs, and I would just play them. So they're the ones that sort of stick out. But yeah, I could easily maybe give you a top 20, take a photo, you can stick them on your
for sure.
on your podcast. Generally, what I do is I'll buy a book which might be of interest, and I'll make notes, or I'll underline the bits I think are really important, and I'll take those notes into a page of A4, and then that'll be my sort of go-to reread,
Right.
and it starts to sort of sink in. That's my strategy. And then podcast-wise, obviously, there's a huge library out there, isn't there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a guy called Vince Walsh, who you know as well. He was saying that his only problem with podcasts, they're quite low yield. He says you can tune in and tune out of them very easily, so they don't go in as deeply.
Oh, really?
Which he said on the podcast, and said that, as people have probably already done with us right now, is what he said. But he says you have to be really actively listening to it, and if you miss a bit, you have to go back, or it won't go in properly.
That's true, yeah. I mean, the whole recall piece it has been really critical in my development, like recalling, reread, recall, recall. And I think that's why a lot of things have sort of stuck.
Yeah. So can I ask then, so you've been a coach now for, how many years is that, 20?
Yeah, I'd say I left teaching at 30. I'm 55 now, so 25 years.
25 years. Are there any things that have stayed with you the entire time, and this is kind of like the core of your coaching?
I did a sports science degree, and then I did a PGCE, and that PGCE I was taught how to teach, and that 8 years or 10 years as a teacher definitely has shaped the core of my beliefs and my motivation, which is ultimately to coach. Because there's a difference between management, leadership, and coaching. You know what I mean? So if you were to say to me, right, you can only pick one, what would you do? I'd be a coach.
Right.
Or if you put it in a teaching an analogy, you can be the head teacher, you can be the deputy head who's doing the management, or you can be the PE teacher. I'd be the PE teacher.
Right.
So if you say to me, what is at my core, it's coaching and teaching. And then the management bit and the leadership bit is the add-on.
Okay, and this may be a bit of a big question, but over those 25 years, are there any key things you've felt and gone, that's an element I need to change of my style?
Yeah, I would say naturally I am probably quite introverted.
Really?
Yeah, I can move to presenting and to be in the front of a team or whatever, so I can do that. But but I'm equally quite happy on my own company, and sometimes I need to be on my own just to sort of renew my emotional batteries. Some people renew their emotional batteries by talking and communicating and sharing stuff. I'll tend to, withdraw a bit. And I think sometimes I can not show ranges of emotion, which I actually think people would prefer I did. And I had that feedback from 360 feedback when I was 35, actually 36. And it was the captain at the time who said, we wish he would show more ranges of emotion. So show us when he's happy and show us when he's angry with us, because I'm not the most tactile person necessarily. So I've had to learn to show those connection pieces that are important, the high fives, the eye contact, the arm around the shoulder. So I think, I've had to learn to do that. I mean, Racing saw ranges of emotion because you couldn't help but get frustrated sometimes and get angry and get like, come on. But equally when we won, I was keen to show them that I was really happy with them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And be yourself like you would be with your mates. I think being England head coach naturally makes you more reserved and naturally you're on your guard more because of the pressure of the job. And also, you're usually going around telling everyone bad news that they're not going to get picked or whatever. Yeah. So there's a small cohort of people that like you, but a lot of them are frustrated with you. So you tend to sort of be a bit more standoffish, which I don't think is necessarily the best way for me to be the real me. And and I think that's why I think the lads at Leinster would probably have seen closer to the real me than either the environment before or the environment after.
And is that something that every environment you've been at, would you say you've just taken things from that and it's helped build you as a coach? So now you'd say you're at your best? Or do you think there are certain situations that can actually take away from your ability?
I think it's a roller coaster. I think you're always learning, definitely. But I've put myself in some difficult situations. And sometimes I question my sanity. Why I've gone down, why would you go to France and try and take on a difficult team and not have French as a natural first language? So definitely, did I feel I progressed in France? In some ways, I felt I regressed in certain elements of my coaching because I was trying to coach in a style and a manner that I was used to at Leinster because the players had a better skill set. But I had to sort of step back and take it to a more fundamental, basic game plan, which felt like a regression to me because obviously I was wanting to sort of layer on more detail and more opportunities to offload the ball or phase play shape or more complex strike plays or whatever. But I had to actually step back and do the opposite. So it felt like a regression. And then obviously because I was dealing with the complexity of all the environment, I was getting drawn away from the coaching. So I was putting time into the preparation for the session, but probably not as much, as I'd wanted to. So, you'd think your career goes, I don't know, straight up, but I don't think anyone's does really in life. Like I'd be very surprised if you found someone who started their life at 18 and it's just gone success, learn, got better. I don't think it's like that. And I think the resilience and the scars, accumulate as well. And they change you a bit, become a little more, not vulnerable, but become, it wears you down a bit, you know what I mean? And so you have to look inside yourself a bit more to find the energy to continue doing it when you're 55 as opposed to when you're 35.
Yeah.
So, and again, I would argue if you took most people 55 years old who've been in leadership roles in business or in sport, they'd probably feel the same way I feel. Motivated, hungry. Like I have long conversations with people my age now, and a lot of them are sort of beginning to sort of retire / semi-retire. There's an easier way. Let's go and travel the world. Let's go on a Lions tour. Let's go and see the Ashes. And thinking that's quite an attractive proposition. But then I had this conversation last night with a friend of mine who has retired, and he's just come back from 8 weeks in South Africa, and we were talking about the next challenge for me, and he says, "Why don't you just do a little bit of consultancy or do whatever?" And I'm like, I can't. I've got more to offer. I can't finish now. I can't feel. My soul wouldn't be at rest if I retired now and I didn't feel like challenge myself in a different way. Richie McCaw would talk about the big wave surfer, and he'd say, I don't know, I just want to get on the big wave, and I know sometimes I'm going to fall off and crash. but if I nail it, I want that feeling as well. And I think, I've got a little bit of that in me. So if I was to, I don't know, retire from being a coach, I don't think I'd be the guy who, at 60 years old, would be happy just, I don't know, walking the dog in the morning and then, I don't know.
On a golf course.
I couldn't see that. Like, I think, I'd have to find a different challenge, be it a physical one, I know, or challenge myself in different ways. So I think it's how you're wired. I think I'm more wired to want to take on challenges and to finish my career, and without getting too deep, your life, when you get to 55 becomes 75 very quickly, and that you feel like, okay, I've done lots of things. I've given my family and my friends and myself some great memories and experiences. Not all have been great, but we've worked in different countries. We've had different experiences. We've had great opportunities to meet interesting people. And I think that's the driver.
And would you ever be interested in going and setting up a high-performing environment in a different sport?
I'd like to be a second set of eyes in a different sport. So I do work with different sports. So like I've worked with many sports, particularly in the UK. UK sport, I've been on interview panels to appoint coaches from different sports. I've been on reviews of different sports. I've been on technical advisory boards for different sports. I've presented conferences for different sports.
Yeah.
And I do think there's a book, actually, I think it's called The Second Set of Eyes. And it's actually about, a coach like me going into, say, a football environment, sitting and shadowing a manager for 2 weeks and, giving them critical, friendly feedback as to what I've learned from my career, the ups and the downs, someone to share ideas with. There's so much in that, I think. Like, I would love it.
Yeah.
Like my mentors, the 3 people that mentored me, have had a huge influence on shaping my philosophy. And I know I was actually, it's not happened yet, but there's a football manager actually who's potentially I'm going to connect with, who just wants that second set of eyes. And
Really?
I think someone from rugby, a team sport, a similar, it's invasion game, et cetera, Yeah, I would love to do that. And I'd love to. What does it feel like to work in South Africa? What does it feel like to coach in Australia or New Zealand? What does it feel like to work in Argentina, or to go to Fiji or Samoa and coach the national team there? That all those things would excite me and motivate me. And that's the sort of, I guess, you finish your career and you've coached in England, coached in France, coached in Ireland, coached in Australia, coached in wherever. And then you aggregate all that learning and then you pass it on to the people or the young coaches. I find that very motivational. I'm motivated by helping other people get better. So when I see, some of the young Premiership coaches who I've coached become directors of rugby, it's obviously, proud of them. But also when I see them struggle, I can't but reach out to them because I want to help them because I know how lonely and tough an existence it is. So that's ultimately where maybe the cycle ends, for me. Not that nothing ever ends, but, the career progresses from my own coaching into coach development.
So the end of that cycle is giving back and actually taking some kind of, would you like to do almost a bit like, like Kevin Bowering used to help?
For sure. Exactly. That's exactly what I'd like to do.
Yeah.
And he was the guy that probably, I miss him now. And I missed him every day, really. Obviously I didn't speak to him every day, but, his legacy is inside me, and I want to pass on, what he passed on to me to other coaches. So yeah, that'll be definitely the end.
Yeah, I really like that. And also, I think if you do go to football, there's probably a lot of parallels between Racing Metro and Premier League football.
Sure. I actually was very lucky that there's a book Carlo Ancelotti wrote called Quiet Leadership. Really good book. And he talks about coaching in different environments. And I read it before I went to Racing anyway. I reread it again because he failed at PSG, got sacked at PSG, and obviously he's achieved multiple European Cup wins, but he's also failed in different clubs as well. Anyway, it's a long story, but basically I brought in a company called Minute 9 into Racing to study our halftime effectiveness, and it was probably a bit more than that. It was like pre-match, our post-match, our halftime. So, but they'd also worked with Real Madrid, and Carlo Ancelotti's son, David Ancelotti, is his assistant coach at Real Madrid.
Really?
And he's interested in rugby. So anyway, I connected with David Ancelotti. And when I finished at Racing, I got a text, some really nice messages from lots of people, but got one from him. It was day 2 after I'd left. And he said, listen, my dad's been through the same thing. I've been through the same thing. It's very difficult to do what you're doing, with the different languages, the different cultures and everything else. So if you'd like to come and visit us, we'd love to see you and what we're not. So I've not done that yet because there's other things I'm just trying to negotiate and navigate in my diary. But ultimately, if I can get out there before the next job starts, that'd be amazing.
I'd see the Real Madrid environment.
And speak to his dad.
Yeah.
More important, as much as anything else. I've actually met him before once. There's a leadership program called Leaders in Performance.
Okay.
And they do something called a P8, which is where before the leadership conference, a group of coaches, like-minded coaches from different sports meet in a private setting for a day. And I've been lucky to be invited to that a few times with coaches from American football, from basketball, from Aussie Rules, from rugby league, from soccer and whatever else, hockey, netball. And Carlo Ancelotti was one of those. So I have met him. And so that's on my to-do list, in the next month or two, go and see Real Madrid if I can get out there.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Let me know how that goes.
Yeah.
So just to finish up here, there was something I spoke to you about before, but when I finished my career, I kind of look back with a bit of a, what if I could have done a bit more there? What if this has gone right, this has gone right? But had you offered me the same career when I was 17, I would have bitten your hand off for it. But it kind of changed. I was wondering, is that something a lot of people feel at the end of their careers?
When you sent me that question through, I thought that was a really good question. And I'd be really interested if you asked a 65-year-old head teacher who's retiring, or a police officer, or someone who's worked in any organization at any level, when you get to the end of your working career, do you look back with regret and go, is that it? Is that it? And you'd hope no one would say that, but I get the feeling that a lot of people would say it. I think they go with a tinge of regret, But I would urge people not to think like that. It is part of life. Like, life is it's a roller coaster, isn't it? There's ups and downs, and your life is ultimately decided by the impact you make on people around you, and how much you sort of help people grow and develop. And sometimes there'll be success, and sometimes there'll be failure. So, when you asked the question about yourself, your rugby career, I thought to myself, do I have any regrets now? I've been in clubs that have been promoted. I've been in clubs that have won finals and lost finals. I've been in an international team that's won amazing games. I've been in an international team that's lost games. I've, left England. I've won the European Cup. I've lost the European Cup final with Leinster. I've been to Racing. I've had amazing opportunities, but then I've lost my job. I'm now, waiting for another job. If you'd have said to me as a 21-year-old leaving Carnegie College down the road, you're going to do all these things, 100%, I'd have bitten your hand off, 100%. But I feel probably a little bit the way you feel, but I'm trying. And I don't think ultimately, when I do finish my career, I will have any regrets. But I know that in order to achieve that, I need to fulfill the drive inside me to challenge myself, to get the best out of myself, to give back what I've learned, to pass on to other people, my own experiences. And then, that's the quote the psychologist said to me. He says, then when you retire, will your soul be at rest? And I think my soul will be at rest, you know what I mean? Because people forget the wins and the losses, but they remember for who you are as a person. And, you might say, well, I didn't really achieve, as many selections I wanted in the Premiership. But look what you're doing now. You're young, you've got podcasts, you've got a leadership company, you wanted to meet people, you want to grow, and you're going to inspire people. So that's actually success, isn't it? I think everyone would think that in a little way, but I would urge people not to think like that, because life's too short for regret, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a pretty good answer. Well, I think the regret thing, you sometimes ask people, I always ask, do you have any regrets? And a lot of people say, no, not at all, because it brought me to where I am now. And I kind of, I get that. Determinism aside, you say you end up in the same place. I think everyone does have regrets, but it's almost that sense of being happy to have them because they're...
Yeah, it is. It's an easy one to say, isn't it? Oh, yeah, no, I have any regrets. Of course, I have regrets. regrets about the refereeing decision here, or a missed opportunity there, or something I could have done differently there. So, but that is part of life. Like you can't find anyone who wouldn't have regrets. I don't believe that's true. But it's making sure that your mindset is that it is part of life. Like there'd be no one who you wouldn't have, mistakes or things have happened that have, upset your trajectory. I don't know anyone that doesn't have those ups and downs in life. Or certainly all my friends, and we're all, mid-50s now, whether it's, I've got friends who've had, cancer, and like lots of people got divorced, and people have, not had kids because they couldn't have kids. They wanted kids, and they wanted to travel and they couldn't, or whatever. There's so many little things, well, not huge things. They're huge things, obviously. And there's so many things that happen in everyone's life. But if you have a mindset to say, listen, I've got one chance at this life, and I'm going to go and live it, and I'm going to have my mindset is not to be held back by the regrets, then I think you'll finish at the end and you'll think you should be content. What I don't want to do is get to the end and think, God, I'd have regret if I got to the end and I didn't feel I'd maximized, what's inside me, or I hadn't given everything that I wanted to give. That's when I'd have regret. I don't have regret at the moment.
I think that might be the perfect place to finish it. That was awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Stuart. And
no problem.
Hope to see you again.
Thank you.